America, the land of the free, is facing a crisis of division. The nation is reeling from unprecedented protests against President Trump and his administration. From coast to coast, citizens are taking to the streets, their voices rising in a chorus of discontent. The scale of these demonstrations is staggering, a testament to the deep-seated anger and frustration simmering beneath the surface of American society. The protests, sparked by a series of controversial policies, have brought the country to a standstill. Millions have abandoned their daily routines to participate in marches, rallies, and demonstrations. The message is clear. Americans are deeply unhappy with the direction of their country. This is not just a passing storm of discontent, this is a full-blown crisis of confidence in the government. Trust has been eroded, replaced by suspicion and fear. The very fabric of American democracy seems to be fraying at the seams. The question on everyone's mind is, how did we get here? The answer is complex, a tangled web of political maneuvering, economic anxiety, and social unrest. But one thing is certain, America is at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming days will have far-reaching consequences for generations to come. One of the most contentious issues fueling the protests is President Trump's stance on cryptocurrency, particularly Dogecoin. Once a vocal supporter of the meme-based digital currency, Trump has seemingly reversed course, leaving many investors feeling betrayed and uncertain about the future of their digital assets. The president's sudden shift in policy has sent shockwaves through the cryptocurrency market. Dogecoin, once riding high on a wave of speculative fervor, has plummeted in value, leaving many investors nursing heavy losses. The situation has been exacerbated by the lack of clear communication from the White House, leaving many to wonder what prompted this dramatic about-face. Critics argue that Trump's erratic behavior is indicative of a larger pattern of recklessness and incompetence. They point to his history of making impulsive decisions based on personal whims rather than sound economic principles. The cryptocurrency debacle, they argue, is just the latest example of how Trump's unpredictable nature is harming the American economy. Adding fuel to the fire are rumors of insider trading and market manipulation. Whispers of government officials profiting from advanced knowledge of Trump's policy shifts have only heightened the sense of anger and distrust among the American people. Another flashpoint in the current wave of protests is the Trump administration's decision to slash funding for the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS. The move, which has resulted in massive layoffs within the agency, has been met with fierce opposition from both sides of the political aisle. Critics argue that crippling the IRS will only exacerbate existing problems within the agency, leading to longer wait times, reduced enforcement capabilities, and a decrease in taxpayer services. They warn that the cuts will ultimately hurt ordinary Americans, who rely on the IRS to process their tax returns accurately and efficiently. The layoffs have also raised concerns about the potential for increased tax fraud and evasion. With fewer IRS agents to investigate suspicious activity, critics worry that wealthy individuals and corporations will be emboldened to cheat the system, further eroding public trust in the government. Adding insult to injury, the IRS layoffs come at a time when the agency is already struggling to cope with a surge in demand for its services. The COVID-19 pandemic has left millions of Americans facing financial hardship, forcing them to turn to the IRS for assistance with stimulus payments, unemployment benefits, and other forms of relief. President Trump's proposed cuts to Social Security have sparked outrage among senior citizens and disability rights advocates, who fear that the move would jeopardize the financial security of millions of vulnerable Americans. The proposed cuts, part of a broader effort to reduce government spending, have been met with fierce resistance from Democrats, and even some Republicans. Critics argue that slashing Social Security would have devastating consequences for millions of Americans who rely on the program for their livelihoods. They point out that Social Security is not an entitlement program, but rather a social insurance system that Americans pay into throughout their working lives. The proposed cuts have also raised concerns about the long-term solvency of the Social Security program. While the program is currently facing funding challenges, experts warn that drastic cuts could accelerate its demise, leaving future generations without a safety net. Protests against the proposed cuts have erupted across the country, with senior citizens and disability rights advocates leading the charge. They argue that cutting Social Security is not only morally wrong but also economically unsound. The Trump administration is facing a barrage of legal challenges from civil rights groups, state attorneys general, and even members of its own party. The lawsuits, which target a wide range of policies, allege that the administration has overstepped its authority, violated the Constitution, and acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner. One of the most high-profile legal battles centers on the administration's immigration policies. Critics argue that the administration's attempts to restrict immigration from certain countries, build a wall along the US-Mexico border, and separate families at the border are cruel, inhumane, and illegal. Another area of legal contention is the administration's environmental policies. Critics accuse the administration of rolling back environmental regulations, promoting fossil fuels, and ignoring the threat of climate change. They argue that these actions will have devastating consequences for the environment and public health. The legal challenges facing the Trump administration are significant, and their outcome could have far-reaching implications for the balance of power in the United States. Section 6, Project 2025, a blueprint for change. Adding fuel to the fire is the specter of Project 2025, a conservative initiative spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation. This ambitious project, which outlines a comprehensive plan to reshape the federal government, has become a lightning rod for criticism, with opponents viewing it as a blueprint for dismantling the administrative state and consolidating power in the hands of the executive branch. Project 2025, with its emphasis on shrinking the federal bureaucracy, reducing regulations, and appointing loyal conservatives to key positions, has raised alarm bells among those who fear a shift towards authoritarianism. The project's critics argue that it represents a fundamental threat to the principles of democratic governance, potentially undermining the system of checks and balances that has long been a cornerstone of American democracy. The Trump administration's close ties to the Heritage Foundation and its embrace of many of the policies outlined in Project 2025 have only heightened these concerns. Critics point to the administration's efforts to install loyalists in key government posts, often bypassing traditional vetting processes, as evidence of a concerted effort to stack the deck in favor of a particular ideological agenda. Section 7. The global stage protests beyond borders. The wave of anti-Trump sentiment is not confined to American shores. Across the globe, people are watching with a mixture of disbelief and dismay as the United States, once a beacon of democracy and hope, seems to be teetering on the brink of chaos. From the streets of London to the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, protesters have gathered to express their solidarity with the American people and their condemnation of the Trump administration's policies. These demonstrations, while smaller in scale than those occurring within the United States, are no less significant, reflecting a growing sense of unease about the direction of American foreign policy and its impact on the world. The Trump administration's withdrawal from international agreements, its imposition of tariffs, and its confrontational approach to diplomacy have alienated many of America's traditional allies. The administration's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement on climate change, for example, was met with widespread condemnation, further damaging America's reputation on the world stage. Section 8. The White House responds, a chorus of denial. In the face of mounting criticism, the White House has responded with a mix of defiance and denial. President Trump, known for his combative style and his penchant for dismissing his critics as fake news, has largely doubled down on his policies, accusing his opponents of trying to undermine his presidency. The White House has sought to deflect blame for the country's woes, often pointing fingers at Democrats, the media, or even foreign governments. The administration has also attempted to downplay the significance of the protests, characterizing them as the work of a small but vocal minority of disgruntled citizens. However, the administration's attempts to control the narrative have been largely unsuccessful. The sheer scale of the protests, coupled with the growing chorus of criticism from both sides of the political aisle, has made it increasingly difficult for the White House to ignore the widespread dissatisfaction with its policies. Section 9. The Future of America, at a Crossroads. As the protests continue to rage, one question looms large. What does the future hold for America? The answer, of course, remains uncertain. However, one thing is clear. The country is at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming days, weeks, and months will have far-reaching consequences for generations to come. Can America heal the deep divisions that have been exposed by these protests? Can it restore trust in its institutions and its leaders? Can it find a way to address the legitimate grievances of its citizens while upholding the principles of democracy and the rule of law? These are not easy questions to answer. However, one thing is certain: the future of America hangs in the balance and the stakes have never been higher.